What's going on, everybody? GoodMicWork commentaries back at you with episode 503. Here we go with your big Money in the Bank predictions video. We're going to get into some other stuff as well. I'm going to open up here with some wrestling news, and then we'll move into a very brief recap of the Go Home Monday Night Raw and Smackdown shows. I'm also going to predict NXT TakeOver Chicago that airs this Saturday on the WWE Network. And then after that, we will talk about Money in the Bank, and I will give my full card predictions for that show. Should be a lot of fun. The reason I kept this predictions video this close to the weekend is because the channel has been filled with a lot of other content this week. There's tons of videos up on the channel right now if you would like to check them out. On Wednesday, I uploaded a new This Day in History, a 25th anniversary episode on the 1993 King of the Ring. First ever King of the Ring pay-per-view. Very significant and memorable pay-per-view in WWE history. So if you want to check that video out, it's only 30 minutes long. It was a lot of fun to record, and the link is right up there in the top right-hand corner. Also, my little miniature best of series is underway now on the channel as well. I've got about 7 or 8 mic drops that have been uploaded. Extremely low views on these. I wasn't expecting them to get a lot. Most of these have under 1,000. As a matter of fact, I think there's one of them that has somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 views, which cracked me up. I have not had a video with 300 views since like my first year doing commentaries. But so far, so good on those, and I've really enjoyed uploading more frequent content in the past couple of weeks, and I'm still yet to debut the new series that I want to start called The One-Off, where I'm going to come up and talk about just one subject, but I've been so busy with This Day in History, and then CM Punk's UFC fight. Now we've got Money in the Bank this weekend. There's plenty of subjects I could do one of those episodes on, but there's really no room for it or need for it. I've had content up on the channel every single day, so maybe I'll get a chance to start that finally in a few days, or maybe in the middle of next week. Before I get into Raw and SmackDown and then get into all of my predictions, there's a couple of news tidbits going around the wrestling world that I just want to mention briefly, and one of those is some new information that's come out after this CM Punk trial with WWE's Dr. Chris Amon. There were some court documents that had revealed that he actually had a sexual relationship with Jillian Hall back when she was with the company in the WWE. Now, to me personally, this is not a huge deal. Who cares? It's just a fucking relationship behind the scenes. But Chris Amon being a doctor, it's sort of like, you know, it's a violation of the code of ethics. And I don't know if you can really get into any trouble for that or not. But basically, it's considered a pretty big no-no to date somebody that you're treating because, you know, you might not be as objective. Plus, there's the issue of, you know, drug abuse. Maybe you can prescribe pain medicine or I don't know, shit like that, basically, that can become a problem, I suppose, if you are dating a patient. But as far as this situation goes, Jillian Hall has not been in the company in a long time. Chris Amon, yes, it was wrong for him to have that relationship, but I really wouldn't think that this guy would be fired or let go or anything like that for this. Maybe some punishment, maybe a fine. I don't know how it works, but I did find that to be a nice juicy tidbit, even though at the end of the day, it's not really that big of a story, but it's getting a shit ton of press on the internet right now. So I at least wanted to bring that up. I briefly glanced at the UK tournament. The winner will face Pete Dunne later on this month at a big show at the Royal Albert Hall in London, and I believe the date on that is June 26th. I only saw 2 matches, I think, in their entirety. I watched Ashton Smith defeat Joseph Connors, and I watched Jack Gallagher defeat Drew Gulak. So aside from that, I haven't seen too much of the tournament, but I'm really interested to see the winner take on Pete Dunne at the end of the month. That should be fun. When I did my last podcast over the weekend on Sunday, episode 502, it was primarily focused on CM Punk's UFC fight and New Japan's Dominion show. Now, despite everything I talked about regarding CM Punk's fight in the UFC, there's one thing that I omitted, and I purposely did not talk about this because it was so new and it was so fresh that I didn't want to make the mistake of flying off the rails and potentially ranting about something that I didn't really know anything about. Most of you know by now what took place on Twitter with Corey Graves the night of CM Punk's UFC fight. So I'm not going to really rehash anything, and I'm going to try to get my thoughts out here in just a couple of minutes because this is becoming an old story now, but a lot of you have been asking me what I think about what Corey Graves said after CM Punk's loss last Saturday night. Now, I tweeted a few things about it, that's for sure, because when I first saw these tweets by Corey Graves, I was like, what a dickhead. I can't believe he would say that. Right after he gets the shit beaten out of him in the UFC. It was just, I thought it was poor timing. It made him come off as petty, and I didn't even understand why he was doing it. Well, the fans lost their shit, of course, and started really getting on his case, and people were even making YouTube videos about him and stuff, and the world wanted to crucify Corey Graves. Well, he then ended up doing an interview, like just a couple of hours later. So much took place. You know, in the middle of the night after CM Punk was receiving medical attention at the hospital, so much was going on, including a Twitter rant by Corey Graves and then an interview. And I forget who he did the interview with. I would give them credit. I'm sorry. But he went on to explain himself more as to why he has an issue with CM Punk and talked about how CM Punk completely abandoned him, just stopped talking to him, cut him out of his life, and at one point told him that he didn't want to be friends with him or anybody else in the WWE at all. And a lot of people, after CM Punk left, reached out to him, including Corey Graves. And Corey Graves went on to tell this whole story about how close they were, even talked about how CM Punk held his newborn kid before he did. I guess because he was on the road and Punk was there. I don't know what was going on. But they were super tight. And after CM Punk left, Corey Graves reached out to him a couple of times and even asked him if he wanted to go have dinner when he was in town. And CM Punk said, no, I don't want to be friends with you, and I don't want to be friends with anybody affiliated with WWE. And that's kind of shitty. You know, I will agree with Corey Graves and anybody that thinks that Punk is kind of shitty for doing that. He is, but that's the way Punk is. We've heard stories about this multiple times. And I'm curious to know his relationship with everybody else in WWE. He was really tight with Kofi Kingston. Remember, Kofi would ride with him on his bus and shit? So I'm curious if that applies to everybody, if he really cut out everybody with WWE ties from his life. That's pretty fucking extreme. And I agree that CM Punk is a fucking weirdo. He gets so pissed off. He's so ornery. And he's so easy to alienate because he gets so wrapped up in his head. I saw a shoot interview in the last year or so with Hornswoggle. And he talked about CM Punk was no longer his friend because Hornswoggle asked CM Punk if he had somebody's phone number, and CM Punk just thought he was using him. I remember, I think it was on the Colt Cabana podcast, CM Punk essentially called out Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho also reached out to CM Punk, but CM Punk automatically assumed that it was because Jericho wanted to get CM Punk on his podcast. And, you know, I was thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, CM Punk, don't get me wrong. Jericho probably would love to have you on his podcast, but not everything is about you. Not all people have ulterior motives. Maybe people are trying to be your friend, as crazy as that sounds. Maybe people are trying to be there for you. Maybe people are trying to have your back. But instead, you're just, you know, you're giving them the Heisman, just stiff-arming everybody when they're sitting there saying, dude, we're just trying to be here for you. So CM Punk has every right as a human being to make that decision if he's that bitter. And that's how sad this whole thing is, too. I mean, think about that. These are people that CM Punk, when in the WWE, probably considered to be great friends of his. But WWE and the wrestling business broke him so much to where he didn't want anything to do with the business at all, including the people that he grew to love and respect. And he went on to UFC and he completely cut out everybody in WWE. I think the whole thing is ridiculous. And I think CM Punk does come off as an asshole. I don't blame anybody for wanting to be pissed at him for turning his back, so to speak, on all of his friends. But at the same time, Corey Graves picked one hell of a fucking time to bring it up. And that's why he looks so pathetic here. He has every right to be upset. But why didn't he go on a Twitter rant 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 3 days ago? The timing of his tweets tell me that he was sitting on the edge of his bed, probably in his hotel room or wherever the fuck he was, watching the CM Punk fight with saliva dripping down his mouth, praying, salivating at the idea of CM Punk getting his ass kicked. And Corey Graves just couldn't resist going on Twitter and telling millions of people how much he's disappointed with CM Punk and how this is karma and maybe he shouldn't have turned his back on all of his friends and maybe this is what you get. And this ridiculous shit. CM Punk's been gone from the WWE for 4 years. I think as upsetting as it would be for me to have a friend turn their back on me, I certainly would be able to let it go after all of this time. So I think Corey Graves' timing of the tweets was terrible. I thought he came off looking like a jackass. He looked petty as fuck. And for a guy that seems to be so confident and so good at his job, and the way he was able to reinvent himself after being forced away from the ring due to concussions and landing a break, getting a shot to be a commentator, and then excelling at that, and now becoming one of their most entertaining guys, maybe even the best guy on the headset currently in WWE, excluding maybe, Mauro Ranallo or someone like that. As far as a color guy, he's by far the best. I would just think that if I am Corey Graves, if I'm in Corey Graves' shoes, this is not something that I would want to say on social media, because you just gotta know you're gonna get a backlash. What's the purpose of even calling CM Punk out? He's in the hospital getting checked for concussions because he got the absolute piss smacked right out of him. He's got bigger things to worry about than your stupid hair and your bitter tweets. So I just thought that the timing of it was poor, and I thought Corey Graves should be more mature than that. So I guess there you go. That's my opinions. I can see why he's upset. Hell, I can see why anybody would be upset for CM Punk for taking it to that extreme. But at the same time, CM Punk has every right to do that, and it's been many years now. Hopefully everybody has been able to move on and find peace. I guess Corey Graves has not. Let's get into Raw. And when I say get into Raw, we're not going to get into much. I am going to start off, though, with a rant, because I'm only going to talk about two things on Monday Night Raw. The very first thing I'm going to talk about was this horrific obstacle course. Now, number one, this was a go-home show, and this was a terrible Raw. The last, three at least Monday Night Raws have been steaming bowls of shit and unwatchable. Luckily, I've been up here doing a live stream. It's a lot easier when I have, 200 or 300 of you with me watching it. But otherwise, this shit is just nearly impossible to watch. So they had another Lashley and Sami Zayn segment setting up their match this Sunday at Money in the Bank. And this time, the ring crew starts setting up all this shit. I can't even imagine how much money, time, and energy and effort they put into constructing this ridiculous shit for this stupid segment to quote-unquote build heat for their meaningless fucking match at Money in the Bank. So it's basically like a boot camp obstacle course. And they start bringing out these walls, and they have this giant rope, this fucking apparatus that's probably made out of spare Hell in the Cell parts. And they construct this fucking thing with a rope, and they've got all these obstacles, tires, and the shit for people to crawl under. Just what you would see basically, at a boot camp training obstacle course, in the army or some shit. So all this is set up. Sami Zayn then comes out there and cuts a 45 fucking minute long promo shitting on Bobby Lashley's service in the army and questioning it, and basically saying, I don't believe that you were in the army, and I'm not going to believe that you were in the army until you come out here and complete this obstacle course in front of me. Now, I'm watching all of this on the live stream on YouTube, and I'm thinking to myself, this is fucking stupid. He's out there talking shit about Bobby Lashley. I don't know why Bobby Lashley's not running out there and ripping this guy's head off. He lets him talk and talk and talk and talk. And then finally Bobby Lashley comes out, and I'm thinking to myself, if Lashley actually accepts this challenge and goes first and starts going through this obstacle course, he's a fucking chump. Why would he even do that? So I'm thinking to myself, if they're actually going to do this, and these guys are going to compete in this obstacle course, Sami Zayn absolutely has to go first. So I thought it would be Sami Zayn going first, and then Lashley would annihilate Sami Zayn's time. Lashley decides to go first, and he completes the entire obstacle course very fast. When he gets to the final rope climb or whatever, he climbs up to the top and rings the bell and comes down, and then he's immediately attacked by Sami Zayn. And then Sami Zayn beats him up and throws him into the obstacles and uses them as weapons, and that was it. And it was the dumbest. I just don't understand what's going on. I mean, what are they smoking? What kind of drugs are they on behind the scenes? I mean, this is ridiculous. Now, I'm all for them trying new things. Certainly an obstacle course would be a new idea to build heat for a pay-per-view match. We saw this in NXT a couple of years ago, but it wasn't to build a match. So this thing just seemed like it just took an incredible amount of effort to put together when the end result was nothing. It did absolutely nothing. It did less than nothing. It basically made me want to watch this match even less. So they spent a bunch of money, bunch of manpower, man hours, putting this shit together, all for nothing. The only other thing I'm going to mention about Raw, because the show sucked, was the Ronda Rousey and Nia Jax segment. There was a sit-down interview in the ring. I forgot who was doing the interview. Was it Coach? I think it was Coach. I could be wrong. But anyway, the interview was terrible, of course. Pretty bad mic work by both ladies there. But eventually, they got in each other's face. And Nia Jax, I think, was talking shit like, oh, you can never tap me out. You can never put me in the armbar. And then they got physical in the ring. They actually had a little bit of a scuffle. And Ronda Rousey did, in fact, put Nia Jax in the armbar rather easily. And she tapped out right away and rolled out of the ring. So, my predictions are coming up here in just a few minutes, and I still don't quite know who I'm going to pick. I think I do, but based on that final segment that we saw on Raw, I don't know. But I think you guys are going to enjoy the little twist on the Ronda Rousey and Nia Jax and possibly Natalya angle that I have. I think a lot of people are seeing it playing out one way, and I'm kind of seeing it play out a slightly different way. So stay tuned in a few minutes for my predictions. We'll get into that. SmackDown Live was a much better go-home show than Raw was. This was actually a very good go-home show. What I liked about this SmackDown Live the most is that it gave me, I don't know about all of you, but it gave me personally 3 matches that I have never seen before. Daniel Bryan versus Shelton Benjamin, Rusev versus Samoa Joe, and Jeff Hardy versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Now, the show opened up with a Daniel Bryan and Shelton Benjamin match, and I got to thinking, I was like, I wonder if those guys have faced before. I personally have never seen them wrestle, but I was curious if they had wrestled before, and I was able to find one match on the internet from 2010, Northeast Wrestling, I think it was. There might even be more matches between the two, but first time I've ever seen them work together, and it was fun. Daniel Bryan got the victory there, tapping out Shelton Benjamin, and I liked that a lot. I also liked the interview with AJ Styles and Jerry Lawler. Felt very old school. I like those interviews kind of off from the ring. And Jerry Lawler, I don't know what he's doing sporting his 1996 outfit, but I enjoyed that as well. And I just liked it. I just liked the overall look and feel of it. It reminded me of back in the day, like the 80s and 90s, when they would do those platform interviews with Mean Gene on Superstars or Wrestling Challenge. I always loved those days, and this kind of had a similar feel. Rusev, like I said, did defeat Samoa Joe. Now, I love this match because the ending was just fucking hilarious. Miz was the referee for this thing, and Rusev got the victory when Joe was having trouble with the Miz. He had his back turned. Rusev ends up hitting him with a Machka kick and getting the pin. And after the match, Rusev wants to climb up the ladder to grab the briefcase the way everybody has been doing, only to be pulled down by the Miz, who then hits the skull-crushing finale, and the Miz ascends the ladder and retrieves the briefcase and comes down to the commentary table to show the announcers the contract, and he opens it up, and it's filled with pancakes. And I guess the New Day had filled the briefcase with pancakes, and the Miz loses his shit, tosses the briefcase, stupid briefcase, and throws it all over the ring, and he grabs the pancakes and squeezes them in his hands while screaming New Day. It was very dramatic. And they went to commercial. They cut to commercial right as the Miz is screaming. And I just got a huge kick out of that. I was just highly entertained. And I would love it if the Miz won that briefcase. He would make one entertaining briefcase holder, that's for sure. And then in the main event, we saw Jeff Hardy taking on Shinsuke Nakamura. And it's like, wow, another fucking awesome match that I've never seen before. Again, not sure if this has happened somewhere else. Didn't bother to look this one up. I don't think it has, but it's the first time I'm seeing it in 1 2-hour SmackDown show. So SmackDown just head and shoulders above Raw this week. Jeff Hardy got the victory here via DQ when Shinsuke strikes with the nut shot. That's his signature move now. Nails poor Jeff Hardy right in the jewels. Gets disqualified, and he's got his match with AJ on Sunday, and it's about time to get into that. But overall, I thought SmackDown was a very good go-home show, and I thought Raw could lick my taint. Let's move on now to NXT TakeOver and talk about that pay-per-view coming up on Saturday. Now, I did have a chance to catch NXT on Wednesday because I scored kind of a random night off. I'm always at work on Wednesdays, but I just happened to be off. I watched NXT, and I'm glad I did because the main event was awesome. Really good match between Kyle O'Reilly and Pete Dunne for the UK Championship, and Pete Dunne retained, hitting the bitter end, and it was one hell of a TV match. You know, a match of the year as far as a television match goes. I think it's definitely a candidate, and I was really entertained. I'm like, oh my God, for all the nights for me to tune into NXT, I get to watch this gem, and I really enjoyed that. The matches I have for the pay-per-view, I have, I think, only 5 matches. Now, I started to predict these, and granted, I do not watch that much NXT, so I realized that I have an awful lot of heels going over here. So let me know what you guys think about these results. Ricochet taking on Velveteen Dream. I cannot wait to see this fucking match. Jesus. Now, Velveteen has kind of fallen short in recent takeovers against Aleister Black. I think maybe he's due for a big win here. So I think I'm going to go Velveteen over Ricochet. I could easily have that one wrong, but Dream is a character that seems like it's been evolving in NXT. He's over with the audience. He's very good in the ring. He had some classics with Aleister Black. He fell short in the ladder match, I believe, at TakeOver New Orleans. So as hard as he's been working and as over as the character is, I think this is one that he should take. So I'm picking Velveteen Dream to win that. Shayna Baszler taking on Nikki Cross for the NXT Women's title. Now, I like this match. Now, I said all along, remember back when Sanity was drafted to Raw, or they were sent there via the shakeup or whatever the hell it was, everybody freaked out because Nikki Cross wasn't with them. And I immediately said in that week's podcast that that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the NXT Women's division has just been decimated with Ember Moon now heading to the main roster, and the Iconics and somebody else too. So they lost a lot of girls and they need a new one, and they need a contender, and Nikki Cross is very good. So maybe if they keep her in NXT, she can be pushed into a title program. And here we are, NXT TakeOver Chicago just a couple of months later, and that is exactly what's happening. She's got a title match against Shayna Baszler. Now, Shayna just won the title recently. I like her. She's a badass. I like her gimmick and her character, and I think she should be built up as strong as possible in NXT. So when she comes to the main roster, whenever that is, she's another major game-changing talent that's hopefully not going to fade away and become somebody that nobody cares about like Bayley. I want to see big things for Shayna Baszler, and I don't think it's time for her to drop the belt just yet. So as big of a fan as I am of Nikki Cross and would love to see her have her day, I think Baszler is going to retain here. Tag team titles on the line. Here's one that's a little tough because I'm not really sure what to think of this match. I haven't been following it too much, but you do have the Undisputed Era taking on Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. I'm going to go with Undisputed to retain here. I'm just kind of going out on a limb there. I kind of like that faction all with those belts, and I'd like to see that continue. So, Undisputed Era retains in that match. Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa in a street fight. My God, I love these two together. How entertaining has this whole thing been? And you guys probably know better than me. Can we consider this to be the blow-off? I mean, we're talking over a year-long story between these two, and probably one of the best matches I've ever seen back in New Orleans. So a street fight here, kind of a random stipulation. They could have done anything in this match. But I think given everything that's happened between them, this might need to be the final chapter. And if it is, I don't really know who to pick. And I was looking at the card here, and I'm like, shit, I got a lot of heels winning, but I might want to pick one more and go Ciampa. I mean, why not? And I would love to see one of these guys go to the main roster. I mean, they could easily stay in NXT and tear it up, but one of them's got to be involved in the title situation. So I'm like, what do you have happen here? Do you have Ciampa win and then maybe eventually become a contender for Aleister Black, and then you send Gargano to the main roster? Or do you have Gargano win and you send Ciampa to the main roster? I think Tommaso Ciampa would be awesome on Monday Night Raw. A lot of people probably would want to see him on Smackdown, but I don't know. For once, he's a guy that I might actually think might be better suited for Raw. I don't know, but I would love to see one or both make it to the main roster, but maybe we can start with one, and I think maybe the loser of this match goes on to the main roster or something. So considering the current NXT champion is a babyface, maybe I'm going to go with Ciampa here to win the street fight. Bringing us to the main event here, Aleister Black defending the NXT title against Lars Sullivan. And the build to this has been pretty good. A lot of people like Lars Sullivan, think he could be the next big thing, but I don't think it's time to take the belt off of Black just yet, so I'm going to pick him to retain in what should be the main event, because I believe Gargano and Ciampa main evented last time. So hopefully Black and Sullivan go on last here at TakeOver. I will be at work, so there's not going to be a live reaction or anything like that. I'm going to have to check out the show when I get home, but you guys are welcome to send me all the updates on Twitter throughout the night during the show, because I'd love to read them. All right, it's that time. Here we go. Money in the Bank predictions. Now, I'm going to start in order of importance, I think, in these matches. I don't really know what order these matches are going to happen at the pay-per-view, but there is one match that I'm betting on opening the show, and that's Roman Reigns versus Jinder Mahal. I think this match is going to open up here. I think WWE wants Roman Reigns to get that fresh, hot, jacked up Chicago reaction to open up the show. Imagine if the very first thing you hear at Money in the Bank is Roman Reigns theme music. Imagine the noise that crowd is going to make. With the overwhelming boos mixed in with the 30% cheers, it's going to be loud as fuck. And I think WWE wants that. And of course, we talked about in my last episode, 502, that WWE might be planning Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar again at SummerSlam. So having Roman come out here to a loud ovation from the audience and take on Jinder Mahal in the opening match, I don't know, might be a good way to kind of set up and get ready for SummerSlam. And if you want to hear my thoughts on this horrifying scenario of Roman Reigns taking on Brock Lesnar, check out episode 502 or check out the mic drop that I uploaded on this subject just a couple of days ago on my channel. But it's really not a difficult match to predict here. I gotta go Roman Reigns. I think he's gonna open the show with Jinder Mahal. The fans are gonna be booing the shit out of it, but they're gonna be loud. And I think that's why this match should go on first. Because we have a lot of big matches on this card. And if WWE wants the fans to give a shit at all about this match, it should open up the show. Because if this match goes on 4th or 5th or 6th, the crowd is going to be virtually silent. Because nobody cares about the feud, nobody gives a shit about Jinder, and everybody hates Roman. So if you don't catch the crowd at a hot time here, this match could really fall flat. So I think you got to open with it, and I'm picking Roman Reigns to win. Bobby Lashley versus Sami Zayn. I'm not going to spend any more time talking about this ridiculous shit. Bobby Lashley wins this match. Daniel Bryan taking on Big Cass. Now, Daniel Bryan beat Big Cass at Backlash, tapped him out, I believe. So why do this match again if you're going to have Daniel Bryan beat him again? So I'm going to pick Big Cass to score the victory here. Maybe he even does it clean. We did see Daniel Bryan. Who did he lose clean to a couple of weeks ago? Rusev, right? So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that somebody twice his size and twice his weight actually beats him clean in this match without having to cheat. So I don't know if Cass is going to do it clean or not, but I do think he's going to get the victory in this match at the end of the day. Bludgeon Brothers taking on Gallows and Anderson. Now, this is a match that I would love to see if it was current Bludgeon Brothers versus 2015 Gallows and Anderson, hot off their Japan run and a pretty credible tag team. So I think they would make a really good opponent for Bludgeon Brothers, but, you know, they haven't been very relevant, you know, in a while. I'm glad to see Gallows and Anderson on Smackdown, but still, you know, what have they even done? Even when they were champs on Raw, it was, you know, it just was meaningless. I mean, I'm so disappointed the way WWE used this tag team. So I'm going to predict the Bludgeon Brothers to retain the tag team titles in this match. Carmella versus Asuka for the SmackDown Women's title. This one is tough because I've said all along when it comes to the two women's title matches at Money in the Bank, I feel that one belt is going to be retained and one belt is going to change hands. So a lot of people, based on the rumors of Natalya turning heel, are assuming that Natalya is going to screw Ronda Rousey, Nia Jax is going to retain, and Asuka is going to defeat Carmella. But I'm going to predict that Carmella wins. And I'm going to go even one better. I'm not only going to predict that she wins, I'm going to predict how she wins. I think Carmella is going to win via disqualification. I think something is going to happen. Asuka is going to get herself disqualified by accident. Maybe Carmella will pull some shit. Maybe she'll pull an Eddie Guerrero and fall down and make it look like Asuka hit her with a chair. I have no idea. But I think whatever happens here, Carmella's going to escape with the title. But since she also beat Charlotte at Backlash, that's why I think she actually has to get her hand raised here. Because I think when it comes to her promos and her on the mic, if she's able to say that she defeated Charlotte and Asuka at back-to-back pay-per-views, that's Chris Jericho, I beat Austin and Rock in the same night level shit right there. So I think you got to do it. And I think you can hold off Asuka winning. Now, this is all assuming that this comes to a head shortly after. This is just one night, and Asuka will wind up winning the belt, maybe at Extreme Rules, maybe on SmackDown, I don't know. But I really want to see WWE go into SummerSlam with Asuka as champion so she can take on Charlotte in the rematch from WrestleMania. And another thing that I was thinking in my head is I was comparing this situation between Asuka and Charlotte to AJ and Nakamura. The first time at WrestleMania, it was a babyface match, just like Charlotte and Asuka. The second time around, and since they've been feuding after WrestleMania, it's been better because it's now a babyface and a heel situation and you have heat. So what I would actually like to see is I would like to see one of them turn heel. Now, Charlotte would make an obvious option there because she's already a great heel, but I think Asuka as a heel would be fun. The only problem with that is now you have Asuka and Shinsuke Nakamura, both heels, both kind of doing the same thing. But if Asuka somehow turned heel after she beat Carmella for the championship or something like that, and Charlotte challenged her for the title, and there's a personal issue there, and then they go into SummerSlam and Asuka taps out Charlotte. Whatever the result is, I think, Asuka needs to tap her out. And if they do go with the babyface, if they do go with this match at SummerSlam and they're both babyfaces, I think that outcome will be very predictable. You wouldn't imagine that Charlotte's going to beat her twice. Everybody would assume that Asuka is going to win. But if Asuka's a heel with a ton of heat, doing a bunch of dastardly shit to Charlotte week after week on TV, a lot of fans could say, oh, Charlotte's going to get her revenge here and take the title, when in reality, Asuka winds up retaining. So those are just a couple of ideas in my head. So I think Asuka needs to take the belt off of Carmella really, really soon, but I don't think it'll be on Sunday. I think Carmella is going to figure out a way to keep the belt. Speaking of figuring out a way to keep a belt, I think Seth Rollins will do the same thing against Elias. I'm happy Elias is getting this opportunity, but Seth, with that Intercontinental title right now, is on a roll, and it's a very positive thing in the company, and I don't want to see it end. For all you Elias freaks out there, oh, give him the title, that's a perfect belt for him. Yes, it is, but unfortunately, Seth Rollins is in the middle of his run right now, and I have no interest in seeing Seth Rollins drop the belt at least right now. Maybe SummerSlam, or maybe somewhere else. And Elias losing on Sunday does not mean that he's buried, so if Seth Rollins beats him, please don't fucking cancel your WWE network and tell me that Elias is going to NXT. Take your lithium and let's talk about this logically. And at the end of the day, if Elias gives Seth a hell of a fight here and it's a very close match and he fights his ass off for the belt and he falls short and Seth wins, who cares? It's wrestling. We see Elias every single week, and he's going to have other opportunities, and I promise you, he'll be a champion at some point in the WWE. You guys know that. The way the belts change hands these days, it's fucking hot potato, every single belt. So Elias falling short on Sunday does not mean that his career is over. I still think he has a very good chance of being the Intercontinental Champion in the future. And that now takes us to the big match between Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey. Now, this one's tough too because there's so many factors to consider here. And I was just racking my brain today. Even when I was at work, I'm like, who the fuck am I going to predict in this match when I do my podcast later? I really don't know. So in light of everything that we've been seeing on TV with Natalya, I think it's pretty obvious that she's gearing up for some sort of a heel turn here, which is what I said the moment she showed her face on Raw during the shakeup. As soon as she was there and immediately went on to talk about how close her and Ronda Rousey are, I said, there you go. There's your first big feud for Ronda Rousey. They're going to put her with Natalya, this veteran, this Hart family member that can take care of Ronda, work well with her, and she'd be a really great kind of first program and first opponent. So the more they hug and the more they profess their love to each other, the more I'm 100% convinced that they are going to feud with each other in the future. And now Natalya has been having this knee problem on TV as well. And it was really funny. Over the past few days on Twitter, we had seen some screenshots of the previous week. Natalya's right leg was hurt or taped up. And then this past week on Raw, it was the left one. Or maybe it was vice versa. Whatever the case is, it was the wrong fucking knee that she was selling this past week on Monday Night Raw. And when you tie in the possibility of her going heel, I think that's something WWE should exploit. I think they should take this horrendous botch that nobody paid attention to, and that's not on the writers. That's actually on Natalya. You're a talent. You got to remember which limb you were selling the week before. It's not really the goddamn writer's job to figure that out. Now, somebody should have picked up on this. Somebody should have even said when she was taping her knee up, hey, are you sure that's the right leg? But nobody did. So really, at the end of the day, you got to put that one on the talent's shoulders. I'm sorry, Natalya, I love you, but that one's on you. but I think it would be really cool if they kind of incorporated that into Natalya's heel turn. If she does turn heel, she can be faking the injury the whole time. And maybe it's Ronda Rousey who figures it out. You know how they always like show evidence up on the Titantron during big segments on Raw? Maybe Ronda figures it out and says, hey, Natalya, look, here's you 3 weeks ago on Raw with this knee hurt, but then here you are last week with that knee hurt. What's going on here? So maybe it can be a situation like that. So what I think everybody is thinking is going to happen here, because that's what I've heard from all of you. I have not heard any other scenario other than this one. And that is that Natalya will turn heel and cost Ronda Rousey the match. Nia Jax will retain. Stephanie McMahon might even be involved. And Natalya might even be a briefcase holder. So a lot of people are thinking that Nia Jax here is going to retain because of a heel turn by Natalya. But I don't think it's going to happen that way. I think the heel turn by Natalya is absolutely going to happen, 100%. But I say let's put a twist on it. The scenario I just laid out there is way too predictable because that's what everybody thinks is going to happen. It's really not going to surprise anybody if it does at this point because the word's out. So let's change it up. Let's do the Natalya heel turn, but let's not do it at Money in the Bank. Let's continue to build the issue and save it. So for this match, instead of Nia Jax finding a way to steal a victory against Ronda Rousey, I say you put the belt on Rousey. I do. Couple of reasons. Number one, I mentioned a few weeks ago that I think it would be a really fun publicity opportunity for WWE to have Ronda Rousey and Brock Lesnar both be champions at the same time. And if it's true that Brock is going to drop the belt at SummerSlam, that does not give them much time. So at least it gets the two of them champs together. I know the fans are going to think that's ridiculous and, oh, who the hell cares? Hey, I get it. But you know who cares? WWE cares. And in addition to that, it was also announced this past weekend at the UFC pay-per-view that Ronda Rousey would be inducted into their Hall of Fame. I wasn't even aware that they had a Hall of Fame, but they've got one, and she's going to be going in. She's going to be the first woman to ever go in to the UFC Hall of Fame, and I believe that's on July 5th. So it's another one of those situations where I think WWE might want to have her as women's champion during that induction. Now, she doesn't have to take the belt. I think that would be fucking stupid if she won the belt and actually took it to the Hall of Fame induction. I don't think that needs to happen, but still, having her be a champion in WWE while getting inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame is just something that the WWE would want to do. With that being said, I think Ronda Rousey will in fact defeat Nia Jax. She will tap her out at Money in the Bank, and then you save the heel turn with Natalya down the road. Because think about it. If you put the belt on Rousey, you got to figure out a way to take it off. And who's going to beat her clean? You know what I mean? So that takes us in to the women's Money in the Bank. And this match could go to anybody. I was looking at the women here. I'm like, shit, you got Ember Moon, you got Charlotte, you got Becky. Becky is probably the only babyface that I would like to see win the briefcase. I think the briefcase is better on heels. But if it's going to go on a babyface, I'd love to see it go on Becky. And I was this close to predicting Becky. And I've talked about the other girls. I don't think Charlotte needs to win it because she can get a rematch or she can get a title match without the briefcase. Same goes for Ember Moon. I think Ember Moon and Charlotte will both challenge for title belts at SummerSlam. That's my prediction. And I don't think either one of those ladies need a briefcase to do it. So I think it needs to go to somebody else. And in light of what I just predicted with Nia Jax and Ronda Rousey, I say you give it to Natalya. I say she fights and she fights. I mean, they're doing that injury. They're doing that angle with the leg, right? With the injured knee. So maybe she just, she can't even fucking walk and she's just fighting and gritting it out and she's climbing with two hands and one leg up the ladder to try to retrieve the briefcase. Somehow, by hook or crook, she finds a way to win the briefcase and she's so happy. And they cut backstage to show Ronda Rousey watching on the monitor and clapping for her friend. This could be before or after Rousey's match with Nia, who knows? And it can be a big, tearful, happy thing for Natalya, and she wins the briefcase, and they can carry on the friendship between Natalya and Ronda on TV. And then in a couple of weeks, or maybe even a couple of months heading into SummerSlam, they do an angle on Raw where maybe Natalya is on crutches, but she's got the briefcase, but she's on crutches. She can barely walk. She's going to be out of action for a couple of weeks while she nurses the injury. And then Ronda Rousey gets attacked, gets beat up. Maybe Nia Jax comes in and attacks her from behind and beats her up. Maybe Stephanie comes out to ringside with Nia Jax and everybody's like, holy shit, is Nia Jax turning heel and forming an alliance with Stephanie McMahon? And all of their attention is on that. What is Stephanie doing with Nia? And everybody kind of forgets poor little Natty, who had to kind of powder out of the ring because she's on crutches and she's on the outside of the ring, helpless to do anything to protect her friend, looks up at Nia, looks over at Stephanie, smiles, drops the crutches, pulls off the fucking knee brace, gets in the ring, hands the briefcase to Stephanie. She calls for a referee to come down to the ring. He rings the bell. Match starts. Natalya lays on Rousey, pins her 1, 2, 3, becomes the women's champion and turns heel. And now you've got a miniature female authority faction on Raw. You got Stephanie with Nia and now Natalya, who is your champion. And Ronda Rousey gets completely fucked over. And now you've got a match at SummerSlam and a one-on-one match between Natalya and Rousey. You know, Natalya would drop the belt, right? And that Rousey would rip her arm off and regain the title and gain her revenge on her former friend for turning her back on her. But maybe Stephanie, with all of her authority, throws some obstacles in front of that and says, okay, if you want to get your hands on Natalya, you're going to have to face Nia Jax too, and we'll make the match at SummerSlam a triple threat. So that's kind of where my mind was taking me. I think it would be more fun to just play it out, draw it out. WWE, who knows if they'll even have any interest at all of coming close to doing what I just proposed there. But I think holding off on the Natalya heel turn at Money in the Bank would be more fun and give Ronda the belt. That way it gives Natty something to steal. You know what I mean? So otherwise, if she just turns heel on her and attacks her in a random segment, then okay, you just got two girls, you know, that were former friends. It happens every week with every talent. And it's going on right now with Sasha Banks and Bayley. So I think you got to change this one up. You got to play with it and have some fun with it. And there you go. Natalya is going to win the briefcase. And she's a Raw girl, which means a SmackDown guy, I think, needs to win the briefcase. And that's another thing. Much like with the women's title, I think one belt needs to change hands. One belt needs to stay where it is. I think with the briefcases, you got to split the briefcases up too. So if Natalya is going to win the women's match, she's on Raw. So you got to have a SmackDown guy win the briefcase over there. And I'm down to two names, Samoa Joe or The Miz. And damn, that's tough. I just don't know. Either way here, it satisfies what I felt needed to happen at this pay-per-view. So far, I predicted one ladies champion keeping the belt, one ladies champion losing the belt. I've also predicted a babyface winning the briefcase and a heel winning the briefcase, and I've even split the briefcases up. Those are the three big factors that I think need to happen at this pay-per-view, or not need to happen, but will happen, I should say. So that being said, Samoa Joe or The Miz? Samoa Joe or The Miz? Samoa Joe or The Miz? I think The Miz would be more fun, especially if Daniel Bryan gets in the picture sometime in the future and wins the title. That would be the perfect guy for The Miz to cash in on. And The Miz can hold that briefcase forever. They can do a cash in next year. They're in no hurry here. And that's another thing with these briefcases. And that's another reason why I predicted Natty, because not only do I think you need a heel and a face and a Raw guy and a SmackDown girl or whatever the fuck, I also think you need to have one briefcase cashed in relatively soon and one briefcase being held onto for a long time. So if it's going to be postponed and nobody's going to cash it in until Royal Rumble or WrestleMania next year, I think you got to put it on The Miz, because he has the segment, you know, the Miz TV segment. He can always have that briefcase, always talking in your face, always shaking it in your face, and just being so ridiculously obnoxious with it. You know, there's no better guy. Maybe a Kevin Owens on Raw would be another excellent choice. And while we're talking about babyfaces, I talked about Becky potentially winning the briefcase on the women's side of things. If you're going to have a babyface win it on the men's side of things, I say go with Finn Balor, because the story is there. He still never really got his rematch, did he? Neither did Kevin Owens, I don't believe. So those guys are kind of owed something. So if you are going to go with a Raw guy, I'd probably go with one of them. You notice I didn't even mention anything about Braun Strowman. I don't think he's going to win, although he'd be pretty damn entertaining with the briefcase as well. And I cannot believe, given how dominant this guy is, that I'm not picking Braun Strowman. He could very well win the briefcase, but I'm sticking to my guns here, going with a SmackDown guy. Joe or Miz, Joe or Miz, Joe or Miz. Damn, Joe would be fun too, especially with AJ and Nakamura. What if AJ retains? You know, and Joe comes out there and takes advantage and wins the belt. Joe's a very, very big possibility, especially since he lost on SmackDown. You know, so he could easily climb the ladder and win the briefcase, and I'm really on the fence. I swear, I'm 49% Samoa Joe, but I'm 51% The Miz. So I'm picking The Miz to win the briefcase on Sunday. Which brings us to what may or may not be the main event. We don't even know. And like I said this last week, or I think a couple of commentaries ago, that the fans need to just relax a little bit and check themselves before they start freaking out on social media if this match does not wind up main eventing the show. With the prediction that I just made with the Money in the Bank match, I've got a SmackDown guy winning the briefcase. So if AJ and Nakamura go on last and they absolutely kill each other in their last man standing match to where neither guy can even move, they're both fucking unconscious after the match, what would be stopping Samoa Joe or The Miz from coming out there and cashing in right then? That's their prime opportunity. It's never going to get better than that. So by logic standards, you either have to have a Raw guy win the briefcase so they can't cash in this match. At least that's what I think the rule is. I always thought, whoever wins the briefcase has to cash in on their brand. Really not sure if you can switch brands or not. But if you can't, then a Raw guy winning the briefcase, then you can have the match be the main event. So if I'm wrong on my prediction there and it's not The Miz or it's not any SmackDown guy winning and it's a Raw guy, then fine. Have this match in the main event, no big deal. It may have to come earlier on in the card because, the men's match might have to main event if it's going to be a SmackDown guy winning it. So you got to think about all that stuff. You got to think about who's winning, where they are, what it means if they win as to where you place the matches on this card. It's not just black and white, oh, the title must main event. Most of the time, I'm in agreement with that, but with a clusterfucky pay-per-view like Money in the Bank and so many different possible storyline directions you can go in, you got to be careful where you place these matches. So regardless of whether this match main events or not, I think I'm going to predict Shinsuke Nakamura to win the title. I'm not very confident about that prediction, but I've literally predicted Shinsuke to win every single match these two have had. AJ Styles now has had a long run with the title. He's held it since late last year, and you got Extreme Rules coming up. You got SummerSlam coming up. You got to wonder if they're going to stretch this feud out even more. And if Nakamura wins, then you get a rematch, of course, possibly at Extreme Rules, which could be your blow-off, which means Nakamura then can go into SummerSlam to defend against a completely fresh opponent. Or you can stretch it out 2 more pay-per-views, which everybody hates. Everybody thinks this feud should end. Maybe WWE's not booking it as well as they could. I'll totally admit that. But I cannot believe the fans are demanding that this feud ends when it's 2 of the best fucking wrestlers in the world. I can survive watching this a couple of more months. Fans, like I said, they have the shortest fucking attention spans. I mean, it's week after week of TV. I mean, we have 14 pay-per-views a year. There is so much time to do stuff. You don't need to rush anything. So if WWE wants to make some epic, long program that they can look back on years from now, because, you can't really do a 1.5 year long program in WWE anymore. It worked in NXT because one of the guys was injured for a fucking year. But when you have this much TV and this many pay-per-views, it's really hard to build an issue for a long period of time. You're going to have a match at every single pay-per-view. Unless you're Brock Lesnar and you have a limited contract, then it's different. But if you're 2 regular roster members working full schedules, then there's no way to avoid it. You're going to have to work each and every single pay-per-view. And so far, we haven't liked a lot of the outcomes of the matches, even though the matches themselves have been pretty good. But I predicted Nakamura to win the title every single match they've had, so I'm going to continue on that trend here, and I'm going to say that he wins the WWE title. And if he does, I do believe that should be in the main event. If you're going to put the belt on Shinsuke, I think that should be the last thing you see at Money in the Bank. But it might not be. It might be the men's Money in the Bank match. Either way, it looks like you're going to get a heel win in the main event here. But I could be way off on my predictions. That's just kind of where I see it happening. If Nakamura winds up beating AJ, then they can do the blow-off, the rematch at Extreme Rules. Nakamura finds a way to retain there. And then maybe even the briefcase comes into play if it does wind up being Samoa Joe. I have no idea. There's just so many possibilities. So I fully admit that my predictions could be ass wrong, but who knows? Maybe I'll wind up looking like a genius on Sunday. Speaking of Sunday, for those of you that want to follow me on Twitter, I will be live tweeting throughout the show. It is Father's Day, so I'm going to be busy at work, but I should be in home just in time for the pay-per-view to start. And then as soon as it's over, immediately following Money in the Bank, tune into my YouTube channel, and I will be up live for episode 504, my complete review of Money in the Bank, and I'll also discuss whatever we saw at TakeOver as well. It's going to be a fun weekend. So you guys take care. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you in just a couple of days. Until Sunday, peace.